What happens when a beloved, unshakable Hollywood icon, someone known for calm authority and effortless cool, collides on live television with a veteran talk show host unafraid of uncomfortable questions? Before we dive into the moment that split fans in half, smashed through social media timelines, and nearly froze the studio audience mid-breath, take a second to subscribe to Stage View, like this video, and drop a comment below. Because trust me, you're going to want to talk about what happens next. The cameras were already rolling when Idris Elba stepped onto the set of The View, tall, calm, dressed in a charcoal suit that caught the studio lights in sharp lines. The applause was thunderous, a warm wave that washed over the stage. Idris smiled, genuine, soft, almost shy despite his imposing presence. He greeted each host with easy familiarity. Even Behar reached out with a bright, performative grin. For a moment, everything seemed perfectly in place. But something in the air felt off, just beneath the surface. A tension, thin but sharp, like a hairline crack in glass. Idris sat, adjusting his jacket with that slow, deliberate composure he was known for. Sonny Hostin leaned forward, praising his recent projects. Whoopi Goldberg joked about how even she couldn't pull off suits the way he could. Sarah Haynes said her mom texted her asking if Idris was really that handsome in person. Everyone laughed. Idris grinned, lifted his hands. "What can I say?" And the audience swooned. Then Behar cleared her throat. The sound cut through the lightness like the scrape of metal across stone. "Well," she said, crossing her legs with theatrical precision. "Idris, we've got to talk about something else. Something that's been circulating." The studio temperature dropped, not literally, but visibly, as Idris's expression shifted. Not a frown, not irritation, just a subtle narrowing of the eyes. A flicker. "Circulating," he repeated. Joy nodded. "You know how it goes. You say one thing in an interview, and suddenly everyone's analyzing it, picking it apart." She gestured vaguely, as if swatting at invisible critics. "Let's talk about your comments about people not respecting actors when they venture into activism." The audience shifted. A rustle of bodies. A soft, collective inhale. Idris leaned back, shoulders broad, voice low. "What about them?" Joy tilted her head, her tone growing sharper. "Well, some people think you're talking down to activists. That you're saying actors should stay in their lane, when you yourself speak out on issues all the time." There it was, the match against sandpaper. The conversation had jumped tracks, and Idris could feel it. His jaw tightened just a fraction. Enough for the cameras. Enough for anyone paying attention. "I wasn't talking down to anyone," he said evenly. "I was speaking about balance. How the message gets lost when people assume your motives." Joy didn't blink. "But don't you think it sounded a little hypocritical?" The word dropped like a stone into still water. Whoopi's eyes widened. Sonny inhaled sharply. Sarah made a tiny, involuntary "oh." The audience reacted in a wave. Some gasped, some murmured, some leaned forward in anticipation, as though they were sitting at the edge of something forbidden. Idris shifted forward, his elbows resting on his knees. "Hypocritical," he repeated slowly, tasting the word. "No, Joy. I don't think that. But others do," Joy countered. "A lot of them." Idris glanced toward the audience, then back at Joy. "And you're asking me because we talk about everything here," she said, lifting her shoulders. "That's what this table is for." The room felt suddenly too small, too bright, too expectant. Idris clasped his hands. "Look, when I talk about issues, it's because they matter. Not because I'm trying to fit into some box. Not because I want applause. And yet," Joy pressed, "you're criticizing people who also speak out." "I'm not criticizing them," Idris said, firm but calm. "I'm criticizing the noise around them. Around all of us." Joy leaned in. "So you're saying the public is the problem?" "I'm saying the discourse is messy," Idris replied. "And people jump to conclusions." Joy's voice grew faintly mocking. "Well, maybe you didn't explain it well enough." A ripple ran through the audience, some laughter, some shock, some disbelief. Idris's eyes darkened, his expression turning from polite discomfort to something more guarded, more serious. "Are you saying I need to dumb it down?" he asked quietly. Joy blinked, caught. She hadn't expected him to flip the energy back at her so swiftly, with such surgical precision. "I didn't say that," she replied. "But you implied it," Idris said. A hush fell. Even the cameras seemed to lean in. Sonny tried to jump in. Maybe we can." But Idris lifted a hand, gently, without breaking eye contact with Joy. "No, it's fine. She wants clarity." His voice was so calm it was nearly chilling. Here's clarity, he continued. I believe in speaking out when it matters. I believe in using whatever platform I have to elevate important conversations. And I believe we should all be allowed to express ourselves without being boxed into stereotypes, actor, activist, or anything else. Joy blinked again. Her expression tightened, not anger, but something more complicated. Something like being caught in the very trap she'd set. But when people twist your words, Idris said, and hosts on shows take them out of context. There was an audible ooh from the audience. Joy stiffened. Are you saying I twisted your words? I'm saying you picked the most inflammatory interpretation, Idris replied. And you brought it up here on live television. That's my job, Joy shot back. We ask tough questions. And I answer them, Idris said softly. Just don't expect me to pretend the framing is neutral. A beat of silence stretched long enough to create a crackling tension across the room. The audience was enthralled, some smiling, some whispering, some clutching the edges of their seats. This wasn't the usual cheerful banter. This was something raw, something unscripted, something teetering on the edge. Whoopi finally cut in, her tone half joking, half dead serious. All right, let's all take a breath before this turns into The Wire, talk show edition. The audience erupted with laughter, loud, grateful, relieved. Idris smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. Joy forced a laugh, crossing her arms, clearly not ready to let the moment die. Look, Joy said, pressing on. I'm just trying to understand why you feel the need to criticize the public when they react to your words. Idris's jaw tightened again. Joy, I didn't criticize the public. I criticized the misunderstanding, which is caused by the public, she said. By headlines, Idris corrected. By selective framing. Joy arched a brow. That sounds like blaming the media. Idris opened his hands. I'm on a media show right now. I'm aware. You're implying we twist things. Idris held her gaze. Do you not? The audience exploded, half with laughter, half with gasps so sharp they might as well have been shouted. Joy's lips parted, her expression shifting from challenging to stunned. For the first time, she didn't have an immediate comeback. Idris didn't gloat, didn't smirk, didn't lean back triumphantly. He just waited. The moment stretched, long, heavy, electrifying. It wasn't anger between them. It was something colder, sharper, more deliberate. A clash of control. A duel of tone and nuance. A battle between interpretation and intention, unfolding before millions. Behind them, the cameras glided silently across the set, capturing every shift of posture, every beat of tension, every flicker of emotion in the air. Joy finally exhaled, leaning back. All right, she said quietly. Fair enough, but the tremor in her voice betrayed something deeper. Frustration. And maybe the unsettling realization that this exchange wasn't going the way she'd planned. Whoopi jumped in with practiced ease, steering the conversation into safer waters for a moment. But the damage was done, the line had been crossed, and everyone felt it. Idris sat upright, his posture unmistakably changed. The warmth was still there, but layered now with something more commanding. He looked less like a guest, and more like someone who had reclaimed control of the room. The audience responded to him, eyes wide, breath held, waiting for the next shift. They didn't know it then, but the most explosive moment was still on its way. This was only the spark, the ignition, and what erupted next would divide fans, dominate headlines, and leave the view in a frenzy of debate. The energy in the studio had changed. It wasn't obvious to the casual viewer at first. There weren't raised voices or overt hostility. But there was an invisible current slicing between Joy and Idris now. A thread pulled too tight. The audience felt it instinctively. The hosts felt it. Even the camera operators, usually expressionless professionals, exchanged small glances like they'd accidentally walked into a private argument. Whoopi tried resetting the tone. Sunny attempted a new line of questioning. Sarah shifted in her chair, smiling just a little too brightly. But the tension didn't dissipate. It simply waited. Coiled. Joy wasn't done. Not by a long shot. As a new clip from Idris's recent project played across the big screen behind them, a dramatic scene of him staring down a villain in a dim-lit alley. The audience applauded again, though softer now, subdued by the unresolved electricity simmering beneath the surface. When the clip ended, Idris spoke with genuine pride about the role. But Joy was watching him, not listening. Her foot bounced. Her fingers tapped the table. Her jaw tightened. Then, like a door slamming in an empty hallway, Joy cut in. Idris, I want to circle back to what we were discussing. The air snapped. Whoopi blinked hard. Sunny's smile faltered. Sarah inhaled sharply. The audience murmured again, a low wave. Idris turned to Joy with that slow, measured precision that could freeze a room. You want to circle back? He asked, not hostile, just coolly direct. Joy leaned forward, elbows on the table. Yes, because I think people watching want to know where you really stand. It feels like you're blaming the public and the media for misinterpreting you, instead of owning up to maybe communicating poorly. The phrase hung there, sharp, barbed. Idris didn't blink, didn't flinch. His stillness was almost cinematic. Communicating poorly, he repeated. Joy nodded. Yes, maybe you didn't choose the best words. And maybe, Idris said softly, you didn't choose the best interpretation. The audience let out a low, collective gasp. Joy's face reddened, not from embarrassment, but from the sudden flare of indignation. Are you implying I'm twisting things again? Idris held her gaze, calm as deep water. I'm implying that you're not asking to understand me. You're asking to corner me. Even the cameras seemed to pause. Joy straightened, her voice rising half a level. That's unfair. That's not what I'm doing. Idris leaned in, slowly, deliberately, his presence suddenly larger, sharper. Joy, you're not asking a question. You're accusing. The audience reacted instantly, some applauding, others gasping, others whispering in feverish excitement. The live atmosphere had turned electric. Joy shot back. I'm doing my job. We don't sugarcoat things on this show. And I'm doing mine, Idris replied, which is answering your questions honestly. But honesty isn't the same thing as letting someone misrepresent your intentions. Joy blinked. Her eyes flared. Misrepresent? I'm quoting what you said. Out of context, Idris said, still composed. Selective context. Sunny tried to intervene again, voice careful. Maybe we should. But Joy held up a hand. Not at Sunny, but at Idris. No, she said firmly. Let him explain. If he feels misunderstood, explain it. Different words. Clearer words. Idris sat back, jaw tightening. His voice dropped lower, quieter, but with more weight. You don't want clarity, he said. You want contradiction. You want me to say something that fits whatever narrative you walked in with today. Joy scoffed. Oh, please. Tell me I'm wrong, Idris said. Joy opened her mouth. But nothing came out. And that silence, that split second of being caught off balance, the audience felt it. The tension climaxed. Whoopi finally slammed her hand on the table. Okay, let's pause before someone gets thrown off this set. The crowd roared with laughter, but it was nervous laughter. Charged laughter. Laughter that said, this is getting dangerously real. Joy chuckled, but it sounded thin. Forced. It's not that serious, she muttered. Idris leaned back, exhaling slowly. Joy, I respect tough questions. I respect discourse. But I won't let you put words in my mouth. Joy's jaw worked. Then say what you meant clearly. I did, Idris responded. But you didn't want to hear it. Sunny, sensing the rising heat, quickly steered the conversation in a different direction. Idris, you've also been open about the pressures of fame. But Joy wasn't done. Her voice shot through Sunny's sentence like an arrow. Since you're accusing us of twisting your words, she said sharply, what do you think your responsibility is? As a public figure? As someone people look up to? The audience reacted with a low collective, oh. Idris's eyes darkened. Responsibility to do what? Speak perfectly? Never make a mistake. Never have an opinion someone disagrees with. You know that's not what I'm saying, Joy replied quickly. You're implying it, Idris countered softly. Joy threw her hands up. Everything is an implication with you today. And everything is an accusation with you, Idris said, his tone still maddeningly calm. Funny how that works. The tension erupted into noisy reactions throughout the studio. Some people cheering, some gasping, some shaking their heads in disbelief. Sarah finally spoke, voice tremoring. I think viewers might be confused. They're not confused, Idris said, eyes still locked on Joy. They're watching a conversation where one person is trying to listen, and the other is trying to win. Joy's lips parted in shock. Win. Idris, this is not a competition. Then stop treating it like one, he replied. Another wave of audience reaction. Loud, chaotic, electric. Joy leaned in again. You're being defensive. And you're being confrontational for ratings, Idris said. Dead silence. Stone cold. The kind of silence that makes everyone freeze. Joy stared at him. Eyes wide, breath shallow. Excuse me? Idris didn't blink. You heard me. Whoopi let out a long, exhausted sigh, the kind only someone who's seen decades of live television disasters can produce. "Oh, for heaven's sake," she muttered. Sarah covered her mouth. Sunny's hand went to her forehead. The audience erupted, some clapping, some groaning, some shouting, "Wow!" Joy swallowed hard. "So now I'm using you for ratings?" Idris spread his palms. "Joy, we're talking about a 6-minute viral clip. You're pushing a narrative because you know it'll cause conversation. Engagement. That's television. I get it, but don't pretend it's something else." Joy's breathing grew heavier. Not angry, hurt. Frustrated. Cornered. "That's insulting," she said, voice trembling with restrained emotion. Idris softened, just a little. "It isn't meant to be. It's just acknowledgement. We both know how this industry works." Joy's face flushed, a mix of indignation and something deeper. "I don't appreciate the insinuation. And I don't appreciate being framed as a hypocrite," Idris replied. "We're even." The audience burst into loud applause, some rising from their seats. The energy was uncontained now, too big for the room. And that was when the shift happened. Joy's expression changed, not angry anymore. She looked wounded. Not by Idris's words, but by the realization that she had lost her footing. She inhaled deeply, steadying herself. "Idris, I'm not your enemy." He nodded gently. "I never said you were." "Then why are you treating me like one?" she asked quietly. That question sliced through the room. Idris hesitated, and in that brief pause, the vulnerability in Joy's voice hung between them like delicate glass. "I'm not," Idris finally said, his voice softer. "I'm treating the conversation with the seriousness you brought into it." Joy blinked hard. Something in his tone, calm, understanding almost, landed differently. She whispered, barely audible even to the microphones. "I was just doing what I always do." "I know," Idris said. "And I'm responding the way I always do." The room shifted again, not calmer, not resolved, but deeper. More human. More complicated. Sunny exhaled in relief. Sarah smiled nervously. Whoopi murmured, "Thank God," under her breath. But just as the tension seemed to settle, just as it looked like both sides had finally found their footing, Joy leaned forward once more. "Then can I ask you something, genuinely?" Her voice was steady now. Careful. Measured. Idris nodded. "Of course." Joy took a breath. A long one. A deliberate one. "Do you think," she began, "that sometimes your confidence comes across as arrogance? Not just here, but in general." The room exploded again. Sunny gasped. Sarah whispered, "Oh my God." Whoopi closed her eyes like she needed divine intervention. The audience roared with shock. But Idris didn't react the way anyone expected. He didn't snap. He didn't deflect. He didn't get angry. He simply stared at Joy with a long, unreadable silence. And then, he laughed. A low, rich, disarming laugh that filled the studio, disarming tension in a single wave. Joy blinked, surprised. Utterly thrown off. The audience murmured in confusion. Idris shook his head, still smiling. "Joy," he said, voice gentle but firm. "If I were arrogant, I wouldn't be sitting here explaining myself." The audience exploded with applause. But then he added, "However, I think you genuinely want an answer. And I'll give you one." Joy's eyes widened. The crowd leaned forward in unison. Idris continued, "Confidence gets misread all the time. Especially in men. Especially in black men. People think calm equals cold. Or assertive equals arrogant." Joy stiffened, but didn't interrupt. Idris's voice softened. "So to answer your question, yes, I do think some people interpret it that way." Joy swallowed hard. "And I think," Idris added, "you walked into this conversation today with that interpretation already in place." Joy didn't argue. She didn't push back. She simply looked at him, really looked at him. And for the first time all episode, her expression wasn't defensive, or confrontational, or calculating. It was reflective, quiet, human. The audience watched in stunned silence. And then slowly, Joy nodded. "Fair enough," she whispered. The moment was raw, vulnerable, astonishingly real. And just when the air seemed to settle, when the storm seemed to pass, Joy made one final decision. One final step that would push the clash into unforgettable territory. She leaned forward, voice steady, eyes locked on Idris. "Then Idris, do you think I misunderstood you? Or do you think I'm one of the people who twist things?" The room froze. Because that question, that was the detonator. And Idris's answer would decide whether this moment became a disagreement or a cultural earthquake. The studio felt silent in a way that didn't make sense for daytime television. No rustling, no whispered reactions, no shifting in seats, just stillness, the kind that follows a lightning strike. Joy Behar's question hovered in the air like smoke. Then Idris, do you think I misunderstood you? Or do you think I'm one of the people who twist things? She didn't raise her voice. She didn't sound defensive. She sounded exposed, as though she already knew the answer, but needed to hear it anyway. Idris sat back slowly in his chair, palms resting on his thighs. For a moment, he didn't respond, just looked at her with those dark, steady eyes that seemed to reflect every unspoken emotion in the room. Sunny swallowed hard. Sarah pressed a hand to her chest. Whoopi froze mid-blink. Thousands of invisible viewers watching at home would later rewind this exact second, again and again, because something indescribable passed between the two of them. Something personal. Something powerful. Finally, Idris leaned forward. Joy, he began softly. I think you listened to what I said, but you didn't hear me. Joy's fingers curled slightly against the table. And, Idris continued, I think some part of you came into this interview expecting a contradiction, not a conversation. The audience didn't react with their usual gasps this time. They just listened, quiet, reverent, like they were witnessing something intimate unravel. Joy took a slow breath. So, you do think I twisted your words? Idris shook his head. Not intentionally. Not maliciously. But you did look for the version that would provoke. Joy blinked fast, too fast. Not tears. Just shock. What makes you think that? She asked. Idris gestured gently toward the table between them. Because you didn't ask to understand. You asked to challenge. Joy's expression faltered, the first crack in her practiced composure. I challenge everyone, she said, voice wavering. That's who I am. That's my role. And I respect that, Idris replied. But there's a difference between challenging truth and cherry-picking tension. The audience exhaled as if they'd been holding their breath for minutes. Joy looked down at her hands, an unusual, almost vulnerable gesture. I wasn't cherry-picking. I was going off what people were saying. People don't know the whole story, Idris said. They only know the headlines. Joy looked up again, gaze steady. And it's my job to address those. Yes, Idris agreed. But it's also your job to question the headlines too. Not just repeat them. A sharp ripple crossed the room. Not shock, not humor, but agreement, discomfort, recognition. Joy opened her mouth, paused, then closed it again. Whoopi, seeing Joy visibly thinking, whispered into her mic. This is the quietest she's ever been on the show. The audience burst into laughter, nervous, grateful, breaking the tension for a heartbeat. Joy didn't laugh. She seemed to be drifting inward, wrestling with something unspoken. Then she looked at Idris with a rawness that no one expected. You know, she said quietly, sometimes I push too hard. I don't mean to, but I've been doing this for so long that I just go. She mimed a train speeding forward. I don't always stop to think how something will land. The audience murmured in surprise. Sunny's eyebrows shot up. Sarah's jaw dropped. Whoopi tilted her head, almost proud. Idris softened in an instant, his entire posture shifting, his shoulders lowering, his expression warming. That honesty right there, he said gently, means more than anything. Joy blinked. It's just the truth. It is, Idris said. And here's mine. He paused, not dramatically but sincerely. When I speak about issues, I choose my words carefully because I know they'll be picked apart. I know they'll be misunderstood. That comes with the territory. Joy nodded. I understand that. But understanding isn't the same as empathy, Idris added. Joy stared at him, quiet. I think you interpreted my confidence as aloofness, Idris continued. I think you saw my calm as dismissive. And I think you thought I didn't want to take responsibility. Joy opened her mouth to respond, then stopped again. And that's okay, Idris added. We're human. We interpret things through our own lenses, our own experiences. The room shifted, softened, like a pressure valve had been released. Joy leaned in, voice low. So, what lens do you think I was looking through? Idris exhaled slowly. A lens that expects arrogance where there isn't any. Joy's eyes flickered. And, Idris said, a lens that expects men who push back to be combative. Joy straightened. That's not. She stopped herself. Idris nodded gently. I know. It's not conscious. It's instinct. Joy crossed her arms. One of her usual self-protective gestures. But this time, she looked less defensive and more reflective. When you said I was looking for a contradiction, Joy began, it made me feel. She paused. It made me feel like you saw me as unfair. Idris tilted his head slightly. Were you being fair? Joy hesitated. Swallowed. Not entirely, she admitted quietly. The audience gasped, a soft wave of surprise and admiration. So then, Idris said, leaning forward, we're both aware of what happened here. Joy sighed. I guess we are. A fragile peace settled between them, thin, delicate, but real. But just when the tension seemed to dissolve, when the studio felt like it was settling back into some semblance of order, Sarah broke the quiet. I just have to say, Sarah began, her voice shaking with adrenaline, I've never seen a conversation like this on our show. The audience applauded. Sunny nodded. Me neither. This is real conflict resolution. Joy gave a half smile. Real conflict, yes. She glanced at Idris. Resolution? We'll see. Idris smiled, a slow, genuine smile that warmed the room. We're working on it. The audience erupted with cheers. But Whoopi, always the truth teller, raised a hand. Don't get too comfortable, folks. Because Joy's not done. I know that look. Joy's eyebrows lifted in surprise. What look? The one you get, Whoopi said, right before you ask something that makes our producers panic. The audience roared. Joy smirked, turning back to Idris. Actually, she's right. Idris chuckled. Of course she is. Joy tapped the table twice. Because there is something else I want to ask you. Sunny's eyes went wide. Sarah whispered, Joy. Whoopi shook her head. Here we go. Joy inhaled deeply. You said earlier that you feel your words get taken out of context, and that you're expected to be perfect because you're a public figure. Yes, Idris said. And you said people misread your confidence. Yes. Joy leaned in. Then tell me this. Do you ever misread us? The hosts? The press? The people asking you questions? The air froze again, but differently. Not hostile. Curious. Open. Idris blinked. Misread you? Joy nodded. Do you think you sometimes assume we're attacking, when maybe we're trying to understand? That we're provoking, when maybe we're just trying to get past the surface? Idris paused, longer this time. Sunny watched him closely. Sarah leaned forward. Whoopi folded her arms, eager to hear the answer. Idris finally spoke. Yes, he said. I do. Sometimes. Joy's eyes widened. Idris continued. When you've been misunderstood enough times, you start expecting it. Even when someone's intentions are good. Joy exhaled slowly. And sometimes, Idris added, I walk into an interview ready to defend myself. Even before anything happens. Joy stared at him. So we both made assumptions today. We did, Idris said softly. The audience murmured, moved, stunned, captivated. Joy reached out, not dramatically, not theatrically, but subtly, and touched her fingertips to the table near his. Then maybe, she said, voice low. We start over? Idris looked down at her hand, then back up at her face. And he nodded. Start over, he agreed. The audience cheered, loud, emotional, relieved. Joy smiled for real this time. A genuine, warm, slightly shaky smile. All right then, she said. First question. How are you today? Idris laughed, and the entire room lit up with him. But the moment wouldn't stay light for long, because there was still one final shift coming. One that no one, not even Joy, saw approaching. Sarah raised a card in her hand, eyes wide. Guys? We have to go to a commercial break in 10 seconds. Whoopi groaned. Oh, the timing. But just before the cameras faded. Just before the screen dissolved into ads. Joy turned to Idris one last time. And she asked, After this off camera, can we talk? Honestly? No walls? Idris nodded gently. Of course. The screen cut to commercial. But what happened after the break? What spilled onto the stage next? That would become the moment that split viewers down the middle and sent social media into full meltdown. The studio lights seemed dimmer, as if the air itself had absorbed the weight of everything that had just happened. Conversations that usually resumed the second camera's cut didn't start this time. Instead, the silence felt like a collective inhale being held too long, every person uncertain of whether to speak, move, or simply pretend the last few minutes hadn't detonated right in front of them. Idris remained seated for a moment longer than everyone else. Not because he wanted to stay, but because he needed that extra breath. His jaw was clenched, but his eyes were steadier now, clearer, as though the confrontation had stripped away something he'd been carrying far too long. He stood slowly, straightened his jacket, and nodded politely, though distantly, toward the panel. Joy Behar avoided his eyes. She shuffled note cards that didn't need shuffling, her fingers trembling just enough to betray the confidence she tried to project. Sunny Hostin watched the entire scene quietly, lips pressed together in a line that suggested she was choosing, carefully, not to escalate anything further. Sarah Haynes looked torn, glancing from Joy to Idris like she wanted to break the tension, but didn't know how. And Whoopi Goldberg. Whoopi just stared at the floor, breathing deeply, her expression unreadable, an unusual thing for her. The cameras cut. The red light blinked off. The stage manager signaled they were clear. But instead of that familiar post-show bustle, the room remained suspended in emotional static. Idris exhaled first. A single heavy sigh. Not angry. Not defeated. Human. That sigh alone seemed to signal the crew back to motion. Sound tech stepped forward. Assistants moved with forced normalcy. A producer hesitated near Idris, unsure whether to approach him with the usual courtesy or retreat, and let him leave without a word. He spared them all the confusion and turned toward the exit. But just before he reached the backstage curtain, Joy's voice cut through the low murmur. Idris, wait. He froze. Not because he wanted to, but because the entire room did. Every head turning at the same time, every ear sharpened by the lingering electricity of conflict. Joy stepped forward cautiously, the stiffness in her posture betraying her discomfort. I didn't mean to come off the way I did, she said slowly. It's a talk show. We push. We probe. It's what we do. You know that. He didn't turn fully, only angled his head enough to show he was listening. But maybe I pushed too hard today, she added. If it felt personal. I'm sorry. The apology wasn't dramatic. It wasn't perfect. But it was honest. Idris finally turned to face her. You didn't push too hard, he said quietly. You pushed without listening. That's the part that stings. Her breath hitched almost imperceptibly. He continued, voice steady but carrying a gravity that made every person nearby fall silent again. When someone tells you they're struggling, not as a celebrity, not as a headline, but as a human being, you don't challenge that. You don't twist it. You don't turn it into an angle for television. You sit with it. You respect it. The words weren't cruel. They were careful. Meant to land, not to wound, but to teach. Joy looked genuinely shaken, something rare for her. I hear you, she whispered. He nodded once, a gesture of closure rather than reconciliation. Then he left the stage. Not dramatically, not angrily, but with a dignity that made the entire room reflect on what they'd just witnessed. Inside the control room, producers exchanged glances that were equal parts disbelief and relief. They knew the moment would explode online. The clips were already being clipped. The sound bites already being isolated. The tension already being packaged for headlines. And it didn't take long. Within hours, the internet caught fire. Twitter, no X, was split straight down the middle. Team Idris erupted with praise. He handled that with so much class. Joy crossed a line. He had every right to call her out. This man just taught a masterclass in emotional honesty. Team Joy defended her fiercely. She's a comedian. Asking tough questions is literally her job. That wasn't personal. Idris overreacted. People need to stop being so sensitive. Comment sections turned into battlegrounds. Clips circulated like shockwaves. Memes appeared within minutes, some humorous, some brutal, some unfairly targeting either side. Podcasts dissected the confrontation. Entertainment analysts called it one of the most intense moments ever aired on The View. Articles debated who was right, who was wrong, who was misunderstood, who went too far. And while all of that noise filled the digital world, Idris released a short statement on his social platforms. I spoke from my heart today. No regrets. No hostility. Just honesty. It was brief. Composed. Undeniably him. Joy didn't post anything that day. Or the next. But Whoopi broke her silence during the following episode of The View. She opened the show with a thoughtful, almost somber tone. Yesterday got real, she said simply. And sometimes things get real because people are fighting battles we can't see. The best we can do is listen and learn. The audience applauded, softer than usual, as though they too were processing the emotional weight left behind. Idris' episode became one of the most replayed segments of the season. One of the most debated. One of the most human. And now, as the dust settles, one question remains. What did you think? Did Joy cross a line? Did Idris overreact? Or was this just an unavoidable collision of two strong personalities under bright studio lights? I want to hear your perspective. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Tell me exactly whose side you're on and why. And if you want more deep, explosive, cinematic breakdowns of the biggest celebrity confrontations, make sure you hit subscribe to Stage View. Tap the like button and turn on notifications so you never miss the next intense story unfolding on your screen.